Hey, what is going on, guys? RVZ Stealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the jungle tier list for patch 7.8. Now, in this patch, I'm not going to be placing Udyr anywhere. I'm not going to be ranking Udyr because he is getting some pretty big changes in this patch, and I'm not sure exactly where he's going to fit into the tier list. I might do a separate video on Udyr if he is really strong in this patch, and I'll go over like the build and like how to play him if he does end up being a pretty strong pick. But with that being said, let's get started. So starting it off in the tier 1 for this patch is going to be Graves. Now Graves has stayed tier 1 for I think the last few patches now. He did receive a little bit of a win rate drop after he did get the nerf to his E in the previous patch, but good Graves players are still performing really well on the champion. If you put the time into Graves, he's still one of the strongest carry junglers in this patch. He's got a load of burst damage in his kit. He's also got a ton of consistent damage, which makes him a great pick overall. His ability to clear the jungle efficiently is pretty much better than any other jungler too. You never run low on health when you're clearing as Graves, whereas with a lot of the other junglers, especially on their first clear, like for example Kha'Zix and Rengar, they're gonna run low on HP pretty much every single time unless they go for a cheesy jungle route. So with Graves, because you're always gonna be full HP in the jungle, it allows you to gank a lot more than those junglers, at least in the early game, and you're just never gonna have to base with Graves for the fact that you're low on HP, because unless you're a really bad Graves player, you should never run low on health when you're clearing the jungle. The snowball potential that this champion has is also extremely good, so if you get ahead with Graves in the early game, you should be looking to invade the enemy jungler constantly, because you can just put out so much pressure with Graves. If the enemy team does have a weaker early game jungler, for example Amumu right now, he's a really highly picked jungler. I think he's got like a 13 or 14% pick right now after he did get those buffs. So if you're going up against Amumu, if you can get a kill on him in the early game, you can just constantly keep invading him and shut him down and just get a really good snowball going with Graves. Now for when and when you should not pick Graves in this patch, I think that if he's not banned and you are confident on the champion, then you should be picking him whenever you can. Now these stats on screen here that I am gonna put up, I think are a little bit misleading, because it shows he's only got a 44% win rate against Amumu and like a 42% win rate against Ivern. I don't think this really represents how strong Graves is right now though, because if you're a good Graves player and you're going up against Amumu or Ivern, you should be able to pressure them pretty easily in the early game, and if you know how to play the champion, you should be able to get a good lead against those weaker early game junglers. I think that the reason he does lose quite a bit against Amumu and Ivern is because if you don't get ahead early game as Graves and you don't push your lead and you don't pressure, then once it does reach the 30 to 35 minute point, if Amumu just gets an ult on you in a team fight, or Ivern can just use his shields to block your burst damage, then you are going to be relatively useless. So you do have to know how to play this champion in the early game to be super effective on him, which is why I think he does lose a little bit more against those type of junglers. The next champion in the tier 1 for this patch is Kha'Zix. Now Kha'Zix was in tier 1.5 last patch. The reasons that he's getting back up into tier 1 for this patch, or the reasons that he's back in tier 1 here, is because number 1, other junglers have been nerfed a lot more than Kha'Zix recently. So Shaco, Rengar, I think those two champions took way bigger hits than Kha'Zix did. The Kha'Zix nerfs a few patches ago, I don't really think affected him too much. And then number 2, we're seeing actually a lot of weaker early game junglers being played that Kha'Zix can easily look to abuse in the early game. I was really surprised to see that in Platinum Elo and above, Master Yi is the 3rd most picked jungler right now. He's got a 12% pick rate, and Amumu also, he's got a 10% pick rate in this patch. So those weaker early game junglers that Kha'Zix can look to invade and look to shut down, he can do really well against, and I would be looking to pick Kha'Zix right now against those champions that you can out-duel in the early game and that you can look to get a snowball going up against. He is one of the best snowballing junglers, and he's one of the best dueling junglers because of that isolation. He's also got insane Baron and Dragon control because of that isolation, so whenever you do hit 6 as Kha'Zix, usually what Kha'Zix players look to do is, if it's especially an Infernal Drake, they'll look to solo it, because you just solo that dragon so quickly communicate with your evolved claws. Now, as for when and when you should not pick Kha'Zix, so statistically here, he is struggling a little bit against Ivern, Nunu, and Amumu. Kind of the same as Graves, but like I said when I was talking about Graves, it really just does come down to the Graves or the Kha'Zix player. If you're proactive in the early game, you know how to take advantage of these champion strong early games, then you should really have no problem getting a snowball going up against an Amumu or an Ivern. If you sit back as Kha'Zix and you let the Amumu and Ivern scale, then of course, like come a 35 to 40 minute team fight, the Amumu is going to be quite a bit more effective than you are with that AoE ultimate that he does have. Now, a few matchups that Kha'Zix is winning right now are Rengar and Graves. So if you are looking for some matchups that statistically Kha'Zix does well against, then I would be looking to pick him against Rengar and Graves in this patch. And then the final champion in the tier 1 here is going to be Ivern again. Now, Ivern has been tier 1 for I think the last few patches, kind of the same as Graves. Ivern is getting a few little nerfs in this patch. He's not getting any nerfs to like his shield though, or like the cooldown on his shield. And because that ability is just so spammable, I think that's one of the main reasons to why Ivern's so strong. I think they're nerfing like the range on his W, and they're also nerfing like how his W interacts with Baron and Dragon. So honestly, those nerfs aren't too bad. I think they're also nerfing his base movement speed. So Ivern is going to drop a little bit in power in this patch, but keep in mind right now he's got a 58% win rate, which is insanely crazy. So I would say that win rate is going to drop maybe down to like a 55, 54%. He's going to be a little bit weaker, but he's still going to be really strong, and he's still going to be a tier 1 pick for sure. So Ivern is probably one of the most annoying junglers, if not the most annoying jungler in the game to play against. He can easily invade your jungle, clear it out in an instant with his passive, and he can just walk out and there's really nothing you can do about it. If you don't end up getting vision down on Ivern in the early game, he can very easily 3-buff you, and it's just so easy for a good Ivern player to put the enemy jungler behind in the early game. He also does have pretty good ganks in the early game as well. When you walk in with Ivern and you get the slow off with your E, it pretty much guarantees you're gonna burn the enemy flash, and if they don't end up flashing, or if they do flash, then you can follow up with your Q after that, and a lot of the time you will be able to pick up first blood with Ivern. He also does have one of the fastest power spikes for any champion in the game. Once you get Athene's and Redemption or Locket, you just become a super strong teamfight champion. It only takes you around like 15 to 20 minutes to get to that item spike, depending on how well you're doing in the early game. So once you do get that item spike, then I'll be looking to team fight as him, look to take objectives. If Dragon is up and you've hit that power spike, then just communicate with your team and look to group and take objectives, because it's going to be very easy for you to keep your team alive if you've got your Athenes and you also have your heal from Redemption. Now, for when and when you should not pick Ivern in this patch, statistically, the only jungler that wins against him is Twitch, and that's a really cheese pick that you don't really see very often. So technically, he doesn't really lose against any jungler right now. I would not look to pick Ivern though if your team is really lacking some sort of engage. So if you are last pick, for example, and your team has like a Janna support and you don't have any engage from your top laner, then in that situation, Ivern is a bit of a risky pick, because come a mid to late game team fight, if you don't have any reliable engage, then it's going to be pretty hard for you to be as successful as you could be in mid to late game team fights. Now, in the tier 2 for this patch here are the strong jungle picks. So if you guys don't know like what tier 1 or what tier 2 or tier 3 means, basically the tier 1 champions are like the god tier picks, and they're the strongest, and they're just very strong junglers in this patch. The tier 2 junglers are like the strong junglers. They're still great picks, but they're a little bit weaker than the tier 1 champions. Now, these champions in the tier 2 are going to include Shaco, Rengar, Warwick, Nunu, Lee Sin, Elise, Amumu, and Gragas. So I would say that right now, Amumu and Warwick are probably the two junglers that I would say are just the safest out of these jungle picks. If you're either new to jungle or you don't play it a whole lot, or you're just not mechanically skilled, then I would be looking to pick up Amumu or Warwick in this patch. For Lee Sin and Elise, they are two of the strongest early game jungle picks. They're champions that can just do really well in the early game if you are skilled on the champion. They're also champions though that if you haven't put the time into them, you can look like a very bad player playing these champions. They do take quite a bit more mechanical skill than someone like a Warwick or an Amumu, so if you're practiced on them, I would be picking them up in this patch, but if you're not, then I would just stick to the Amumu or the Warwick. And then for Gragas, he's kind of seen a little bit of a comeback over the past few patches in the jungle and in the top lane as well. I think the main reasons to why he's seeing a bit of a comeback in the jungle is because, number one, he did receive actually a buff a few patches ago. I'm pretty sure his W got buffed to where it does do a little bit more damage now. Don't quote me on that one, but I know he did get a buff to his W for sure. And then other junglers have just been nerfed quite a bit recently too. So like Rengar and Shaco, they were god tier. They were extremely strong a few patches ago, but they've kind of come down in power a little bit. So with other junglers getting nerfed, then it's just gonna make the junglers that aren't getting nerfed and aren't getting touched stronger over the patches. And then for Nunu, he's basically like an Ivern 2.0. If Ivern's banned right now and you want to play a super cheesy jungler that just tries to get the enemy jungler behind in the early game and tries to make the enemy jungler completely useless, then I would be picking up Nunu. Now for the tier 3 in this patch, or for the tier 3 junglers, these are the junglers that are still viable, but they're not jungle picks that you're usually going to want to pick in every situation. The god tier junglers and like the tier 1, tier 2 junglers, you're going to want to pick those in almost every scenario, and there's really no reason why you shouldn't blind pick them. But with the tier 3 jungle champions, most of them you wouldn't want to blind pick them, and you wouldn't want to pick them like in every different scenario, which is why they are tier 3. Now I will put these junglers up on screen here because there are quite a few of them. So that's going to be all for this video, guys. If you did enjoy, then be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.